Battle is reaching its final stages, and humanity's fate hangs in the balance with this last fight. It's the showdown between the mighty king of all demons and humanity's last hope. The savior of humanity, Barua Westgarden, uses his final trump card and summons the strongest sword in existence, capable of cutting through planets. When both opponents clash with their trump cards in hand, the result is a brutal confrontation that leaves both the Demon King and humanity's last hope mortally wounded. But neither of them are ready to back down and dive back for another round. However, before a victor is declared, some opportunistic scumbags decide to take advantage of this moment. With both the Demon King and the human savior mortally injured, these traitors betray their own king and launch a massive attack that consumes both the human and Demon King, and thus the battle ends with both parties falling. While the Demon King is already pushing up daisies, the human is still alive. He reflects on how, after his death, with the strongest sorcerer and sword saint gone, no one will be left to protect humanity. Let's explore the story of this hero later and jump to a new era, which takes place nearly 1,000 years after this great battle. We're at Burrito Academy, and inside its walls, we find a weak student being bullied by a group of lowlifes. This boy is so fragile that a single punch sends him crashing to the ground. The sword and the book he was holding dearly also fell from his hands. The bullies don't like him because he's seen as weak, a runt who refuses to give up despite his lack of strength. What really irks them, though, is that he's trying to learn both magic and swordsmanship at the same time. In this world, people typically choose one path, either magic or swordsmanship, and dedicate their lives to mastering it. That's the norm here, the only way to gain real power. But this boy refuses to follow that rule. Instead, he's stubbornly trying to master both. So the bullies are here to mock him for his pathetic attempt of learning both talents at once. They remind him that he can't even use magic beyond the beginner level, and that he's just a weakling swinging a sword around. But this weak boy gathers his guts and decides to take a stand for himself. He boldly claims that, just like the legendary magic sword saint who surpassed common sense, he intends to combine magic and swordsmanship and become someone who protects others. This ambitious boy is Daria Westgarden, a second-year student at Burrito Academy. But all of Daria's inspiring words only earn him a solid punch to the gut from the bullies, sending him crumpling to the ground. One of the scumbag who landed that punch further sneers at him, mocking his dream of becoming like the magic sword saint. He reminds Daria that the legendary figure is nothing but a myth, and that his goal of mastering both magic and swordsmanship is just a shallow fantasy. The bully continues to kick Daria in the gut, each blow harder than the last, while taunting him to face reality. After seeing how stubborn Daria is regarding his dream, the bully challenges him. If Daria truly believes in his theory of power beyond common sense, he should go out and prove it by hunting down a monster on his own. After laying off the challenge, the trio walks off, leaving the injured boy behind. But instead of backing down, Daria seems to be oddly determined, as though he's looking forward to fulfilling the demand these lowlifes have thrown at him. In the end, his foolish bravery pushes him beyond the academy walls, into the wild, where he intends to face a monster and prove his worth. However, once Daria comes face to face with a massive beast, he's frozen in fear. The monster swings its enormous hand and cuts through him with a single blow. As Daria feels his life slipping away, his only thought is his deep determination to become the magic sword saint, the one who protects others. It seems that his wish to become magic sword saint has been heard, because something miraculous is about to happen. A beam of blinding light tears through the sky, its source coming from the direction of the academy walls. The light radiates from that monument located in the middle of the academy, the same one we saw in the opening scene. The flash of light descends upon Daria, and in that moment, something extraordinary happens. Apparently, the light was carrying the soul of the magic sword Saint Barua Westgarden, whose essence finds itself trapped inside Daria's consciousness. As soon as Barua feels this body, he quickly tries to stand up on his feet, which results him to cough up blood because the wound he has gotten is pretty brutal. Barua quickly uses his healing magic in order to patch up the giant wound, though he can feel that this is not his body. He suddenly notices the monster in front of him, and after seeing its claws smeared with blood, it doesn't take Barua long to realize this creature is the one responsible for his condition. The monster makes a foolish mistake by charging at the mighty magic sword saint, and gets fried for its trouble. Once the monster is dealt with, Barua's mind starts wandering to other concerns, like what happened to him and where he even is. After a long struggle, he finally makes it out of the woods and finds his way to a city. His first impression of the place is absolutely astonishing. The city is not only lavish and grand, but the people walking around are dressed in fine clothes, and the streets are beautifully maintained. It doesn't take much for him to deduce that this civilization is far more advanced than the one from his time. It seems Barua has figured out what's going on. From what he can piece together, during the battle with the Demon King Geranthal, he died alongside the Demon King, all thanks to a sneak attack from the demon tribe. Since he was unable to fulfill his noble role of protecting humanity, his soul was wrapped in deep regret, binding him to this world for an extraordinarily long time. Even after his death, time continued to move in the real world. He wouldn't be surprised if decades had passed since the moment he died until now. He also notices that the owner of this body is wearing an academy uniform. Now that he thinks about it, the academy would be the perfect place to gather various information about this time and place. With that in mind, he decides to head to the academy first. Before continuing the story, let's take a moment to understand this prestigious institution. Burrito Academy is one of the largest academies in the country, with two major departments, the Department of Magic and the Department of Swordsmanship. When Barua finally makes his way inside, he is immediately greeted by a magnificent monument, along with a statue that catches his eye. At first, he doesn't think much of it, and simply pays his respects to the humanity's greatest hero. But as he looks closer, a shocking realization dawns on him. This statue was made to honor him. It doesn't stop there. He also realizes that this is the exact place where his final battle took place. The academy seems to have been built on what was once the wasteland where he and the Demon King clashed. However, this revelation doesn't sit right with him. That land was nothing but barren wilderness in his time. How could it have developed so drastically in just a few decades? Just as he's grappling with these thoughts, he overhears a group of students talking nearby. They casually mention that today marks exactly 1,000 years since the Barua defeated the Demon King. That number, 1,000 years, leaves him completely stunned. His mind reels at the revelation. But then he hears something else. The students are doubting whether Barua even existed, dismissing the hero as nothing more than a myth. Of course, humanity's greatest hero is no mere legend. He is very real, and right now, that very same mighty hero is panicking beyond belief. It's been 1,000 years since his death. But there's another burning question in the Barua's mind. Why did he suddenly wake up after 1,000 years? And what happened to the soul of this body's original owner? On top of that, he clearly remembers that he didn't defeat the Demon King. So what happened to the Demon King, and what became of the demon tribe that killed both him and the Demon King? Determined to uncover the truth, he resolves to investigate the events of the past millennium and find out what really happened. Suddenly, a familiar voice catches Barua's attention. It's a group of bullies, loud and obnoxious as ever, who seem to have returned for another round. Since Barua doesn't know these people, he simply turns around and looks at them. Puzzled, he curiously asks if they're talking to him. The bullies grin and confirm that yes, they're calling him out. After all, he's the only idiot who would dare choose both magic and swordsmanship. They go on, taunting him about how they heard he went to the forest, but claim it looks like he ran away in the end. Of course, Barua has no idea what these clowns are even talking about or why they're bothering him. But then, out of nowhere, a brainwave brings back all the memories of this body's original owner. After acquiring all these memories, Barua now understands everything. These lowly swine are the very ones responsible for the injury Durea had suffered. Durea had always admired Barua, but these bullies had made fun of him for it. When Durea tried to prove himself, he was brutally injured. Now that Barua remembers everything, his expression turns serious, and the bullies are visibly thrown off by the sudden change. Confidently, Barua strides forward, leaving the thug uneasy. He boldly declares that he is Durea Westgarden, a second-year student in the magic department, and he will become the magic sword saint of this era. This declaration just comes off as nothing more than a joke to these guys, and two of the goons charge at our boy in an attempt to take him down. But Barua feels smug as he raises his hand, ready to humiliate them. He decides to take it easy, ensuring they don't die, but everything else is fair game. Once Barua gets his sword in his hands, a single swing sends two of the pesky thugs flying through the air like discarded trash bags. The display leaves the leader of the group wide-eyed and utterly speechless. Those two who just get their asses whooped don't even have the strength to get back up. The so-called boss, however, begins to lose his composure. Barua, on the other hand, is visibly annoyed. This was the one who had repeatedly kicked and punched Durea. Without hesitation, Barua charges forward, sword in hand, and brings it down with force. The impact sends the goon flying backward. His trajectory is only stopped by the unforgiving surface of a nearby building. The collision was so brutal that it literally cracked the wall. The once arrogant thug is now trembling like a whimpering dog in the presence of the imposing figure standing before him. Barua towers over him, his presence radiating authority and strength, causing the thug to shrink further into his pitiful state. Eventually, Barua decides to let the thug off the hook. The thug, on the other hand, can barely comprehend why he's being spared, especially when Barua has every reason and opportunity to exact revenge. Barua explains, in a calm but firm tone, that if Durea were in control, he would be saddened by such an act. Durea, after all, was a kind-hearted person. While the thug truly has no idea what our boy means, one thing becomes clear: that he will think twice before ever approaching our boy. As Barua walks alone, he reflects on how the body of Darea Westgarden now belongs to him. Now that he mentions this name, he remembers that Westgarden is his family name too, which means Darea is of the same bloodline. Suddenly, a bell rings out, and all the students scramble to get to their classes as lunch break comes to an end. They're instructed to move into their classrooms for the next lesson. Watching the commotion, Barua remembers just how strict educational institutions can be, making it difficult to be a student. Later, we find ourselves at Burrito Academy's magic training grounds. One student throws an unimpressive lightning ball that strikes a dummy directly. Everyone around is going wild over the display, but Barua finds it utterly ridiculous. What he's just seen is nothing impressive. It's a low standard of magic. If he has to be brutally honest, the kids from 1,000 years ago could produce better magic than that. Suddenly, one of the teachers approaches him. The old man begins ranting, unable to comprehend why Barua is standing there idly, as if he's a privileged brat. The teacher still thinks this is the same weak Darea he knew, and reminds him that he can't even perform beginner-level magic. This scumbag of a teacher continues to mock Barua, declaring that even if he wanted to participate in the class activity, he couldn't, because he's just a talentless fool. Barua offers an awkward smile before pleasantly asking about the teacher's caliber. Proudly, the teacher boasts that he can use all intermediate magic, and even perform multiple advanced spells. To understand the teacher's level, let's learn the hierarchy of magic. Apparently, magic is divided into 4 categories: beginner, intermediate, advanced, and, at the pinnacle, special magic. In the past, Barua himself had mastered everything up to the advanced level, becoming a full-fledged magician. Hearing that even this teacher can only handle intermediate magic agitates him, as it confirms what he suspected. Magicians in this era have grown weaker as well. The teacher overhears what Barua said, and this offhand remark doesn't sit well with the teacher, who grows visibly annoyed. However, before the argument escalates, Barua throws down the gauntlet, challenging the teacher to a duel. To ensure the challenge doesn't come across as too arrogant, he frames it as a desire to experience the teacher's amazing magic up close. While irked, the teacher dismisses Barua's challenge as foolish, declaring that this runt cannot even grasp the vast difference between their abilities. Still, the teacher agrees to the duel. After all, it's a golden opportunity to humiliate Darea in front of everyone. The teacher, with his inflated ego, makes it clear that there's no comparison between a runt-like boy and a magician of his own standing. As both combatants take their places in the training ground, the students watching from the sidelines are in awe. The very idea of Darea challenging a teacher to a magic duel is enough to leave them wide-eyed astonished. The teacher, brimming with confidence, asks if Darea is ready, to which our boy gives this old coot the green light he was looking for. The teacher takes the lead and decides to unleash an advanced magic spell. While chanting, he smugly remarks that he'll adjust the spell's power to a low level, ensuring Darea isn't injured more than necessary. With that, the teacher casts magic flash bullets, launching a barrage of light bullets toward Barua. But Barua remains completely unshaken, standing cool as a cucumber. With a simple flick of his hand, he obliterates the incoming bullets without any real effort. The magic dissipates as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. The teacher's jaw nearly hits the floor. He stares in utter disbelief, unable to comprehend what he's just witnessed. His shock is so great that even the glasses on his face develop a noticeable crack. Barua, on the other hand, flashes a smug smile, now ready to make his move. It's his turn to attack, and he decides it's time to demonstrate special-grade magic. He's certain this display will be more than enough to teach the arrogant teacher a lesson in humility and silence. With that being said, Barua conjures an imposing spell. Blue flames swirl around him, coalescing into a fearsome attack he calls Azure Cutdown. With his single gesture of hand, he unleashes blades of fire that zip past the teacher. The sheer power of the spell leaves the teacher frozen in place, shrinking in fear. Though the attack doesn't touch him directly, its destructive potential is clear enough to send a chill down his spine. The spectators, meanwhile, are left in awe, witnessing special-grade magic firsthand. They can barely process what just happened. Barua then turns to the shaken teacher. He informs him that in this mere magic duel, he refrained from striking directly. However, if the teacher continues to look down on him, there's no guarantee he won't lose control of his magic next time. Well, as you can imagine, these words are enough to break the teacher's arrogance. Now that he has been thoroughly humbled, the teacher finally acknowledges Barua's abilities. He admits that Darea Westgarden has surpassed him and concedes defeat. Hearing the teacher admit that Darea's magic surpasses his own sends the crowd of students into a frenzy. They are unable to believe that Darea, once mocked and underestimated, has risen to such incredible heights. Meanwhile, Barua feels a swell of pride. He knows that after this display of his abilities, no student will dare to laugh at or look down on Darea again. However, his moment of triumph comes with an unintended consequence. The magnificent magic he showcased has made him the center of attention, and now people are bursting with questions. The teacher, chief among them, demands to know how Dorea managed to gain such power overnight. As the realization dawns on Barua, he begins to feel uneasy. He has no clue how to explain the power he just displayed. Anxiety builds as the crowd's suspicious eyes remain fixed on him. In an attempt to deflect, Barua improvises, claiming he simply grasped the knack of magic. But his words fall flat, and the teacher isn't buying it for a second. As far as the teacher is concerned, Dorea of today is vastly different from Dorea of yesterday, in skill, magic power, and confidence. The transformation is far too drastic to be explained by a sudden breakthrough alone. Barua has finally been cornered. He realizes he has no choice but to concede a portion of the truth. He knows that his magic skills and knowledge were inherited from his past life, and that a wizard's magical power is tied to the soul rather than the body. He rationalizes that such a drastic change overnight would be impossible for anyone who wasn't, in some way, a different person. For a moment, he even considers telling the teacher the full truth about his reincarnation. However, before he can act on this thought, a voice calls out to him from behind. Turning around, Barua spots strange creatures approaching. It looks like the monsters are here after sensing such overwhelming energy in this area. It doesn't take long for Barua to recall that these monsters once inhabited this region. Without hesitation, Barua raises his hand and conjures a powerful electrical bolt. The spell strikes one of the flying monsters directly in the gut, burning it to a crisp in an instant. However, the other monsters quickly retaliate. Acting quick on his feet, Barua summons bursts of firepower to shield himself. The sudden appearance of monsters prompts the students to scatter in panic and retreat back into the academy walls. Seeing these guys running like cowards leaves Barua baffled. In his time, magicians of even modest ability could have easily handled creatures of this caliber. Yet here, these so-called magicians appear helpless, running away like frightened commoners. Barua notices that the teacher remains steadfast, standing his ground beside him. The teacher declares that he will not flee. The teacher uses one of his spells, known as Flash Rain, illuminating the entire sky with a series of blinding explosions. Despite its brilliance, the attack proves futile, failing to leave even a scratch on the airborne monsters. This only deepens Barua's concern. The sheer resilience of these creatures marks them as a significant threat for the magicians of this era. In the distance, a young girl stands determined, channeling her magic into an ability called Fire Spear. She pours every ounce of her strength into fending off the monsters, but her efforts are no more effective than her teacher's. Even so, Barua feels a spark of admiration for her bravery. As one of the monsters dives toward her, he launches himself into action, reaching her in time to pull her away from danger. The girl stares in astonishment, barely able to believe that Dorea himself is the one to save her. Her amazement mixes with awe as he tells her firmly that he will ensure she grows stronger and lets her know that she better burn these words into her memory. Without hesitation, Dorea calls upon his own version of Fire Spear. Magnificent spears wreathed in flames materialize around him. With a single commanding gesture, he sends them soaring into the sky, aiming directly at the looming threat above. As soon as the spears hit their mark, the monsters start dropping like flies. Meanwhile, our guy can't help but feel smug after seeing how his magic is on a whole another level compared to the magic of this era. The girl can do nothing but watch in astonishment as other monsters charge straight at them. But our boy is ready. As the monsters close the distance, Barua reflects on a key truth. When the enemy gets up close, even the most skilled magician has a brief moment of vulnerability while casting a spell. That's why the best strategy against a magician is to close the gap. But that only works on ordinary magicians. And our guy is no ordinary magician. He's called a Saint Swordmaster for nothing. With his blade in hand, he launches himself at the monster horde, slicing through them effortlessly, like cucumbers being prepped for a salad. His signature technique, Air Dance King Storm, leaves nothing standing in his wake. Afterward, he steps down, leaving both the teacher and the girl frozen in awe, unable to do anything but marvel at his power. Barua, on the other hand, is just having the time of his life, amazed at how easy that victory was. A while later, we find ourselves in the library of Buriot Academy. There, Barua is buried in books, though concentrating is proving impossible. His entire body aches like hell. He hadn't felt a thing during the battle, but now the fatigue has finally caught up with him. Moving like he did before feels impossible without some serious training. With that thought in mind, he decides to finish the book he's reading and plan a proper training regimen. After the monster attack, the Academy took the situation seriously and decided to suspend all classes for a while. This unexpected break gave Barua the perfect opportunity to dive into history and investigate what happened after his supposed death. As he pours through history books, one fact stands out in every account. He defeated the Demon King Gurnahel. According to the records, the Magic Sword Saint exchanged his life to bring down the Demon King. With their leader gone, the demons were driven to the far edges of the continent. The magic sword saint who saved humanity became a legendary figure, celebrated for over 1,000 years. But something doesn't add up. The demon tribe that killed both the demon king and the hero has no presence in history. There's no mention of them attacking humans or leaving any trace. It's as if they vanished without a trace, leaving Barua scratching his head in confusion. As he puzzles over this mystery, he spots the same red-haired girl outside in the courtyard. She's practicing her magic, focused and determined. He eventually approaches her and asks if she's practicing. When she notices him behind her, she cracks a smile and explains that she's training her magic. She is practicing here because the training grounds are off limits until the monsters are cleared out. She quickly bows her head in respect, thanking him for saving her earlier. She wanted to thank him right after the fight, but he had left in a hurry, so she never got the chance. She says she was surprised at how strong he's gotten. She also wants to be strong enough to defeat monsters, but no matter how hard she tries, it seems like she's always falling short. Barua wonders if she's feeling disappointed in her inability to grow as she wants. He suspects there's a reason she can't even master beginner magic. Maybe she was born with an unusually small amount of magic power. He tells her to show him her hand. When she does, he places his own hand on top of hers, causing her to blush and feel completely embarrassed. He begins to connect with her inner magic reservoir, and once he does, he's absolutely stunned. She has an immense amount of mana. It's not as much as Barua's, but it's rare to see this level of magic, even in his past life. He excitedly breaks it down for her that the problem isn't that she doesn't have enough mana, it's that she has too much magic power and doesn't have proper control over how to channel it. He then curiously asks her name, which leaves the girl a little bewildered. She is surprised by the fact that he doesn't even remember her name even though they study in the same class. Eventually he recalls her name, Saris, and tells her that she's capable of casting special grade magic. He emphasizes her potential once again, but Saris doesn't seem nearly as excited as he expected. She brushes it off, saying it's impossible. To her it sounds far-fetched. She believes that she has no talent, and her teachers and classmates have said as much countless times. At this, Barua reveals the truth. The people around her are simply too weak to recognize her strength. But Saris sticks to her guns, unwilling to believe it. She repeats what she's been told over and over, she's just a failure. Barua brushes aside her protests, showing no concern for her self-doubt. Instead, he presses her to make a choice, whether she wants to become strong or stay weak. He makes it clear that her decision will determine how he helps her going forward. After hesitating for a moment, Saris finally admits that she wants to become strong. Her determination draws a smile from Barua. For the first time, he sees a spark of the mage's spirit within her, a fire that had been dormant. He reassures her that she may not realize it yet, but she possesses immense magical power, far beyond what she believes. The reason her larger spells fail to activate properly is simple. She pours far more magical power into them than necessary, almost recklessly. Even controlling the amount of magic she uses requires a level of skill she currently lacks. At this point, using beginner spells correctly is likely impossible for her. However, there is one type of spell she can cast without worrying about precise control, and that is special grade magic. Despite hearing this, Saris remains skeptical about whether she is truly capable of wielding such immense power. She recalls how even the headmaster of the academy, someone widely regarded as incredibly skilled, can barely manage to use special grade magic. But Barua points out that this essentially puts her on par with the headmaster. He also reveals that he himself can use special grade magic, assuring her that it's not as rare or unattainable as it seems. Special grade magic demands a massive reservoir of magical power, but for someone like Saris, it should be no issue. The poor girl begins to feel overwhelmed by the conversation and starts to feel dazed. Everything is moving far too quickly for her to process it all. Regardless, they decide to begin the training without further delay. Barua decides to teach her one special grade spell right away, insisting there's no need for elaborate preparations. For her, casting this spell will be no different than casting a beginner-level spell. Saris, however, isn't feeling particularly confident. She can't shake the sense that she's being dragged into something far beyond her abilities. The idea of learning a special grade spell feels overwhelming, and she refuses to believe it's as simple as he claims. To her, special grade magic seems terrifying, and just imagining it makes her nervous. Barua then explains that the spell she's about to cast is called Prominence Gate, a fire-based special grade spell that is relatively easy to handle. According to him, it's akin to casting a fire spear. Of course, Saris doesn't believe it's as straightforward as Barua makes it sound. Doubts linger in her mind as she wonders if she can truly wield such a powerful spell. Still, despite her hesitation, she steels herself. Pushing aside her negative thoughts, she resolves to try. Her determination grows as she focuses on becoming a stronger version of herself. Barua also feels happy to see her quite determined. Before attempting anything, Saris hesitates and asks if the special grade spell she's about to cast won't destroy everything around her. Barua confirms her fears, explaining that under normal circumstances, such a spell might indeed obliterate everything in its path. However, to address this concern, he confidently points at himself and instructs her to target him directly. He assures her there's no need to worry about what happens afterward. With her doubts cleared, Saris decides to follow his plan. As she steps into position, Barua notices how composed she seems compared to before. Hearing his remark, Saris admits that she's so overwhelmed by everything that if she were to feel any more surprised, she might pass out. She recalls vividly how he defeated all those monsters on his own, a memory that fuels her belief in him. Now that she has faith in him, she channels all her inner power and summons an enormous spell. A massive gate of hell materializes on the ground. The gate creaks open, which releases a torrent of sneering hot flames. Saris quickly directs the massive inferno straight at Barua. As the flames approach toward our boy, he stands unfazed and calmly snaps his fingers. In an instant, a barrier encapsulates the roaring fireball she unleashed. The girl stands in absolute astonishment, watching all of her immense firepower trapped neatly inside the shimmering barrier. Barua, calm and composed, launches the fiery orb into the sky in order to make sure there is no collateral damage. He then walks toward her and delivers the news. She has successfully cast a special grade spell. He emphasizes the fact that her belief in him made it possible. Her trust not only allowed her to unleash such powerful magic, but also ensured no harm came to anyone or anything in the process. Saris's cheeks flush slightly as she questions about his true identity. However, Barua brushes aside the question, making it clear that who he is doesn't matter. What matters is her success. She has achieved something extraordinary, and she should be proud of herself. For the first time, Saris feels genuine pride in her abilities. She can't believe she has managed to cast a special grade spell, especially when she has struggled so much with beginner magic. She has always thought of herself as a failure, but now that belief starts to shift. Barua observes her silently, recognizing that her potential exceeds even his expectations. With the overall level of magic users in decline, this era is in desperate need of properly trained mages. In that moment, he turns to Saris and asks if she would like to become his disciple. The sudden offer catches Saris off guard, but Barua calmly reassures her that he is indeed talking about taking her as his disciple. He explains that, out of everyone he's seen at this academy, she is the most talented. Of course, she has every right to refuse, but he reminds her that if she chooses to become his disciple, he promises to train her to become one of the greatest mages in the world. He asks her what her decision will be. The answer is obvious from the start, and as expected, she responds the way everyone hopes for. It blows Saris's mind that in just one day, Barua has completely transformed her. She has no reason to refuse such a tempting offer laid out before her. So, she asks him to take care of her, and this time, she addresses him as Master instead of his name. Later, they find themselves roaming around in the woods, and Barua has no clue why she brought them here of all places. Saris timidly reveals that her practical magic grades were so poor she was given an extra assignment. The mention of an extra assignment catches Barua off guard. Saris explains that she needs to make it to the altar, which is located deep within the forest. Once there, she must channel her magic into a device. That's all there is to it. As she thinks more about it, she remembers that Barua had been given the same assignment. She recalls how they told her to finish it as soon as possible, but with the recent monster attacks, she was too scared to come here alone. Barua understands Saris's concern, but assures her that now that her master is with her, there is nothing to worry about. However, he's still unsure why they would send students who can't even use beginner magic to a place like this. There's always the possibility they might stumble upon a monster they can't handle and ultimately lose their lives. Saris explains that everything has been fine so far. Most of the monsters within the Academy's borders, or rather within the kingdom's borders, are weak and don't attack humans. This news comes as a great surprise to Barua. To think there are monsters that don't attack humans is an extremely rare phenomenon. Saris then mentions there's apparently a dangerous giant lizard monster nearby, close to the hill by the Academy. The mention of a giant lizard jogs some memories for Barua. It's the same monster he had defeated. To think that such a weakling of a monster is considered dangerous baffles him. From what Barua remembers, this land used to have much stronger monsters roaming around. If powerful monsters did exist here, that must have been over 1,000 years ago. Thanks to the legendary magic swordsman who defeated the Demon King, the demons retreated from the kingdom, and the monsters that grew stronger from their magic began to weaken rapidly. Saris agrees with what he has mentioned, or at least agrees that this is what they think happened. This finally starts making sense to Barua. With the demons gone, the monsters grew weaker, and the battles against demons and monsters decreased. As a result, human combat skills deteriorated. Although it all checks out, he has never encountered monsters like the ones he saw during his class in Academy. This means those monsters weren't native to this area, but regardless, they were still weaklings. Suddenly they hear nasty growls nearby. It looks like trouble has officially arrived. At first glance, these monsters look quite dangerous and nasty, which makes Barua a little excited. He turns to Karis and asks if these monsters are harmless as well. Well, by the looks of Saris's scared expression, it's clear how dangerous these monsters are. As soon as the monsters foolishly launch themselves at Barua, he effortlessly blows them away with a single hand gesture. For the next round, he conjures his sword and finishes them off with precise strikes. After dealing with the monsters, he reports to Saris that monsters attacking humans are starting to appear everywhere. This information unsettles Saris. As far as she knows, most people at the academy have little to no combat experience against dangerous monsters. At this rate, it's only a matter of time before casualties occur. Barua, on the other hand, finds the situation oddly satisfying. He's even more pleased that he decided to take on a disciple to train. As they talk, more and more monsters swarm the area. Barua explains that, thanks to her, at least he'll have the opportunity to train a mage who will gain real combat experience. By now, judging from the fear in her eyes, it's safe to assume Saris has started to regret her decision to become his disciple. Without hesitation, Barua steps back, leaving her to deal with the incoming monsters. He assures her that these creatures are just slightly aggressive opponents, perfect for a disciple's training. As she stands in front of the monsters, utterly terrified, her master quickly orders her to calm down. He reminds her that if she can tap into her true power, monsters like these will be easy to crush. After a bit of hesitation, his words finally ignite the fire within her, both figuratively and literally. She begins to conjure her fiery magic, and with her spell Prominence Gate, she summons the Gate of Hell once again. The flames burn the monsters to a crisp, and within moments, there is nothing left of them but ashes. Her achievement lights her up like a kid in a candy store. The fact that she has just defeated monsters fascinates her. Barua gives her props and feels proud of the disciple he chose to take on. He reminds her that she can gain real combat experience if she improves her control over magic. She'll learn to manage her powers and use spells beyond advanced magic. That's her first goal. While he's lecturing her, some monsters latch onto him from behind. Without even looking back, Barua knocks the eager creature away with a single punch. The remaining monsters quickly fall to a barrage of punches, and within seconds, they're all down. However, there's still one left. But this one too gets brutalized with a kick that sends it crashing into a tree. This fistfight was more than just a battle. It's a lesson he wants to teach his disciple. As a mage, she should know a few more tricks up her sleeve. Of course, to Saris this seems like an impossible feat. But Barua explains to her that even mages can benefit from fighting barehanded, and it comes in handy in emergencies. The humble and timid disciple quickly acknowledges what her wise master is saying. With the area now cleared, Barua begins to walk forward. Meanwhile, Saris is left in complete awe. Although she expected her master to be exceptional, he continues to shatter her expectations. From this point on, Barua decides to leave all the fighting to Karis, and promises to take care of any stray fire she might scatter across the area to prevent it from spreading. As they continue on their way, explosions echo through the area one after another. Eventually, they come across the stone altar they've been searching for. Saris is exhausted, clearly worn out. Seeing her struggle, Barua asks if she's okay, but it's obvious she's not. After repeatedly tapping into her power, she's pushed herself to her limits. So far, she's used advanced magic 5 times, which is by any standard insane. But to Barua, this sounds like rookie numbers. He questions how she could be so tired after just 5 spells. The girl feels genuinely disappointed that he can't even relate to her exhaustion. Still, despite all of the shit they have gone through, there's a sense of pride in her they've made it to the stone altar. Now, all they need to do is channel their magic into the device, and the assignment will be complete. It seems that completing this assignment isn't going to be as simple as they thought. Barua has already started to sense the presence of a monster nearby, and it doesn't take long for the creature to reveal itself from the bushes. The beast is enormous, far more imposing than anything they've encountered so far. With just a single growl, the monster generates a blast of air pressure so strong that Saris stumbles backward and loses her balance. Barua quickly catches her before she hits the ground. Seeing such a formidable monster, even he is feeling gravity of the danger they are facing. Just by looking at this creature, he can confidently tell that even mages from 1,000 years ago would have struggled to take on such a beast. The monster doesn't hesitate and charges toward them with incredible speed. Barua instantly decides this isn't a fight Saris can handle. He steps forward, sword in hand, and meets the creature head-on. After exchanging some rapid blows, the monster steps back and uses its magic to make the debris around it float in the air. Our boy finds it quite fascinating to think that this monster can even use magic, and is trying to weaponize the debris. As the monster launches the debris at his opponent, my guy dashes out of the way with remarkable speed. While maneuvering, he shouts to his disciple, urging her to run away while he holds the monster off. To his shock and surprise, instead of running, Saris is already standing firm, her hellgate ready to unleash some screeching hot fire in order to burn this monster to ashes. Although Saris isn't confident she can take down the monster with her attack like this, for a moment, she even thinks of running away. Her body can't stop trembling with the fear of loss creeping over her, but she pushes the negative thoughts aside and stands her ground with determination. She refuses to look like a runt in front of her master. The monster quickly shifts its focus to her and launches its debris in her direction. But her master leaps into action, quickly slashing through the oncoming debris with his sword in order to clear the path for her. With nothing in her way, Saris steadies herself, and with a single commanding gesture, she calls forth her massive firestorm. The activation of Prominence Gate unleashes a fiery column that engulfs the monster entirely, consuming it until nothing remains. The attack ends in smoke, with Saris shocked at her own ability to pull off a spectacular move like that. To her performance, Barua is proud and tells her that no one will ever be able to call her a failure anymore. While her strength has greatly improved, the poor girl reminds him that no one from the academy really saw her attack. As a result, they will think she's talking nonsense about defeating a monster. Barua expresses that while it's true that they didn't see what went down, one thing is for certain now. Saris's reputation as a whole will improve massively from here on out, and no one will ever be able to underestimate her abilities. Speaking of which, let's explore how the magic transmission device works. First, it sends the magic that is powered inside it to the academy. The magic sends barely noticeable traces of its source, which would be the owner in this case. That's how after sending them magic to the academy, they can safely identify who completed the task. Now for the curious question. The Sword Saint quizzes her and asks what would happen when a special grade or advanced level magic struck the device. A shocking realization sets in. The chick realizes that all of her immense magic power just now will be sent to the academy. She's right on the money. Barua confirms as much. The effects of her advanced magic are quickly shown as the transmission device explodes in volcanic flames. Poor Saris looks like she's seen a ghost while our boy is out here chilling with the view. Thanks to her terrifying attack just now, Saris is bound to hear from them later. Fast forwarding to the teacher who ends up identifying the source of magic. Saris is barely maintaining composure in front of her teacher. The old fart tells her that there's just no justifiable excuse for ruining their sacred monument. He talks about the legendary Sword Saint and wonders what his reaction would have been. Well, the teacher doesn't know that Barua is literally right there, who is egging him that the Sword Saint probably wouldn't care about something as insignificant as monument. The teacher still doesn't have any excuse to fail them, and emphasizes that the magic was Saris's at the end of the day. She's happy to hear that. At the same time, the old fart has an issue with Daria Westgarden, who has been a consistent failure so far, until now. Not even the teacher can figure out what the hell happened between the two students, causing them to become so good at magic. Barua argues that Saris is the same she has ever been. The only thing that changed about her is regarding her insane talent, which was overlooked by the academy until Barua's eyes took note of it. At this point, the teacher just can't figure out who this boy is. Suddenly, the saint faces a realization. After all, he was assigned the same exact task as Saris, except he couldn't really take the test since she already shattered the transmission device. The old fart doesn't feel the need to test him, and even gives this guy a free pass from the assignment since he's already aware of his abilities. Unsurprisingly, he admits that the outcome would have been no different if he took the test. Well, both Barua and Saris bolt off without hearing him out. They want to go and see the public's reaction. Barua takes it pretty easy and walks like a king among the students who are bickering about the mage who defeated the monster invasion. They've even caught wind of Saris and her brilliant magical output. They remember her as the clown who burned the sacred monument. Based on their words, Barua is satisfactorily happy with the rumors. On the flip side, Saris feels the opposite because of her experience. Behind them, a whole bunch of girls are gathered around Prince Charming over here. The silver-haired popular kid greets Daria in kind. The saint asks about his identity in return, only for Saris to yank this guy and fill him with the missing information. This hotshot is a genius swordsman, a third-year upperclassman called Flem Riker. Flem has a particular situation that he has been troubled with. It's his desire to fight against Barua, the same mage who became responsible for stopping the monsters and saving the academy. Flem's challenge is on the table, but our boy doesn't know why he's being asked to fight out of nowhere. As it turns out, the Supreme Swordsmanship Council has looked into the matter of the monster attack incident. From their finding, they came to learn that it was a magician who saved the academy from the demons. They're not big fans of that, so that's why they sent their elite genius to fight Daria and prove that he's the more capable warrior. The council wants to prove its superiority over magicians. Even Flem thinks they're prioritizing their own authority instead of focusing on the bigger picture. Well, Barua meets this challenge with an apology, before foolishly asking about the Supreme Swordsmanship Council. His careless question shocks Saris, who is starting to realize that Dorea's memory has been taking a hit with how much he's forgetting. Still, she tries to explain that both the Council and the Central Magic Institute are the two main institutions in the country. The first one is a swordsmanship organization that governs every single swordsman in the nation. The second one is a mage organization that deems authority over magicians, nurturing their growth. They're called the Central Magic Institute. Each faction holds a significant amount of power, but they're always in conflict and see things differently from one another. Barua inquires more about their conflicting relationship, and comes to learn that both organizations have a desire to prove that their weapon is more powerful than the other. It's such a childish argument because the saint thinks it completely depends on the circumstances involved. Saris shares that because of the conflict, magicians and swordsmen are known to share bad blood with each other. Which leads us right back to Flem, who has been standing quiet all this time and requests Dorea to take him up on this offer. After all, it would be a favor to the swordsman if he just accepts the duel. Barua accepts the challenge without hesitation, shocking Flem greatly. He's doing this to accurately gauge the current state of swordsmanship and compare it to his time. Still, knowing that they're in conflict with modern low-tier magicians, Barua isn't expecting much. As they're walking to find a suitable spot for the fight, Barua asks why he's called the Genius Swordsman. Apparently, Flem thinks little of this title and believes that it operates his abilities. He thinks it's because he has an interest in swordsmanship way more than others. Saris fills in the gaps and explains that Flem is actually considered the top-tier strongest swordsman in the academy. So even for Dorea, she thinks it will be a hard match and advises him to be careful. But the Sword Saint isn't worried, not even breaking a sweat. He confidently boasts that his strength stands at the top of the world, not just the institution. Let's transition to Burrito Academy Arena, where both fighters are taking position. Barua is a little impressed that they've got an entire battle coliseum built inside the academy. Glancing towards the stands, he spots his cheerful disciple rooting for him. Poor girl is shot down by Flem's most loyal fangirls, though. The genius swordsman has decided to use a wooden sword for the match, and recommends our boy to use magic freely. Surprisingly, Barua challenges Flem's expectations, expressing that he's got no interest in casting a single magic spell. He takes the wooden sword and clarifies that while he isn't belittling Flem's skills, it's just that he's also confident in his swordsmanship. Surrounded by a wave of blue aura, Barua confidently declares that the difference between their strengths will be revealed with the clash of their swords. Intrigued, Flem looks forward to the swordsmanship power of the magician. With both fighters ready to rumble, they lock things down with a countdown. The countdown ends and Flem immediately rushes forth with a preemptive heavy attack. In response, the saint blocks it without trouble, causing him great shock. One swing after another, every single one of his attacks prove useless against the saint. Flem decides to ramp up the pace and increases his speed, launching a flurry of strikes all at once. But by the end of his attack, Barua stands, unhurt and confidently staring his opponent down. Meanwhile, Flem's mental state is on the decline. He can't fathom how this guy can expertly do both things. As he lunges forth for another charged slash, Barua merely deflects without any trouble. By now, Flem is convinced that this guy's skill is comparable to the legendary talent of the Sword Saint. In turn, Barua is quite impressed with Flem's performance, claiming that it has been a while since he had so much fun. Also, his wooden sword shattered from Flem's previous attack, so now Barua has decided to put down all the stops. He's gonna go full power now and show what he's capable of. Our protagonist uses his magic to grab the wooden sword. With a smile on his face, he gets ready to continue fighting his senior. Dorea hopes their sparring match becomes enjoyable for both. Without wasting a second, he rushes forward with insane speed and attacks the guy, but Flem barely manages to block it with his sword. He's unable to stand his ground, but our boy gives him no time to react and throws another attack. Flem manages to dodge it again. He takes a step back while the protagonist excitedly calls him the genius swordsman. They both rush forward and clash swords with each other. Despite going all out, the protagonist is shocked to see that Flem is still somehow managing to keep up. He attacks the guy, but Flem jumps into the air and pounces at Dorea from behind. Our boy admits Flem would have deserved the genius title even 1,000 years ago. Flem almost hits him, but Dorea easily blocks it with his wooden sword, astonishing the girls observing the match. The protagonist looks at his fragile sword and guesses it's about to break. Flem admits Dorea has insane strength, since he has never seen a sword crack before this. He believes the protagonist deserves an apology for doubting his swordsmanship. Flem regrets his actions, so he takes back his words and accepts Dorea is an excellent swordsman. Our boy smiles and brushes it off. He calls the guy a virtuous person, and thinks it's a nice trait to have. Flem shows his gratitude to Dorea, and since they went all out against each other, our boy lets Flem call him by his first name instead of being so formal. With a cocky attitude, he reminds Flem that he's still just a junior. The guy smiles awkwardly and understands his words. He thinks they should wrap up before the swords finally crumble. The protagonist excitedly smiles and agrees to continue the fight. Flem points the sword towards our boy and begins unleashing his true strength. He announces that he's challenging Dronzer with every cell of his body. Without wasting a second, he pulls out an unyielding flash and produces multiple purple slashes to finish off the protagonist. But despite seeing the huge attack coming his way, our protagonist remains calm. He recognizes the attack is far beyond a student's level, but he easily dodges all the slashes since it's easy for him to read. Otherwise, he's not worthy to call himself the Sword Saint. Within mere seconds, he closes in and effortlessly defeats the genius swordsman, Flem. The senior gets humbled badly, but he admits defeat and throws away the wooden sword. The guy looks genuinely happy as he was able to fight against the Sword Saint himself. As soon as the match ends, Saris excitedly rushes towards the protagonist and praises him for the great fight. He shows his gratitude for the support, but suddenly gets annoyed hearing all the girls going crazy over the guy he just defeated. Flem's fangirls begin tearing up over nothing and assure the guy they still consider him the best, even though he just lost to Dronzer. Our boy feels a bit irritated, but as soon as the fangirls leave, Flem moves his hand forward and thanks the protagonist for the insane sparring match they just had. Dronzer shakes his hand, and they both become good friends. But our boy is still worried if it's fine for Flem to lose like this, since he's sure the guy was ordered to come and defeat him by the Swordsmanship Council. Flem calls him correct, and explains the Supreme Swordsmanship Council is probably going to feel extremely frustrated once they learn he lost to our boy, who has the ability to use both magic and sword. With a careless expression, he believes he's definitely going to get expelled after this. Dronzer scratches his head and calls it completely foolish to separate the two things and create idiotic factions between magic and swordsmanship. He begins wishing there was a faction based on both magic and swordsmanship. All of a sudden, our boy gets an idea, but Saris gets a bad feeling, so she anxiously asks what he's thinking about. He casually announces that he's going to create a faction of his own, which leaves the girl speechless. While she's scratching her head, Flem asks again to confirm if our protagonist is really thinking about creating a faction. Our boy believes it doesn't matter whether someone wants to chase magic or swordsmanship, so he becomes determined to create a faction that accepts both. A new day begins. Dronzer wakes up, and while checking himself in the mirror, he finds out he's still inside the same body he reincarnated in. It's been a few days since he was reborn into Dorea's body, and he doubts the original soul is ever going to come back. So, the guy gets ready and leaves his house for another exciting day. While finishing his food, he suddenly remembers he hasn't gotten a single break ever since he woke up after 1,000 years. Every time, some new nonsense happens. When he first joined the academy, even finding his room was such a hassle for him. Before starting the classes for today, he learns the other students are extremely busy. From whatever he learned from Saris, Dronzer understands that ever since he was reborn, monsters have been continuously mutating and acting up for some reason. So, he needs to hurry up and quickly make a plan to figure out what's causing all of this and defeat the evil monsters as soon as possible. Our boy believes the only way he can manage to do all this is by uniting both magicians and swordsmen of this era, and starting everything from scratch. As he walks toward his class, he hears the students talking about him. The protagonist is fed up with the foolish fights between the magic and swordsmanship councils, which is why he is determined to build a faction of his own. Dronzer becomes annoyed and suddenly stops as he hears others talking about what he did with a teacher. All of them are too terrified to get in Dorea's way. Our boy begins regretting his actions. As soon as he enters the class, Saris greets him and invites him to sit with her. With an annoyed face, he sits down and hears students gossiping about him even inside the classroom. They all think it's nearly impossible to build a faction based on both magic and swordsmanship. The guy finally loses his patience, so he gets up and shouts at them to shut up. The students act like nothing happened, so he calms down while Saris assures him not all students are as bad as he thinks. She recalls his methods and believes he's doing everything to stand out. The teacher finally arrives and announces they are finally going to begin the lectures that were interrupted a few days ago because of the monster attacks that came out of nowhere. He hopes all the students do their best to catch up on their course and begins today's lesson. The teacher explains two major organizations, the Central Magic Academy and the Supreme Swordsmanship Council, which have a huge impact on today's society and even determine a person's social status. Dronzer feels crappy learning about this topic first thing in the morning, but his teacher continues and explains that since they are all magicians, they belong to the Central Magic Academy, which is affiliated with magicians famous for their insane abilities and talents. The country gives them selfless treatment because of their high status. During such a boring class, our protagonist understands that the magicians and swordsmen are glorified by people. That's the reason they have such high status and why no one stands against them, because they're all scared the organizations will come after them. But our boy still doesn't give up despite knowing all of this. After the class, he begins inviting people to his new faction, while Saris embarrassingly stands beside him and tries to support him as much as possible. Just in case, he asks if she's fine doing this with him, since he's sure the Central Magic Academy is bound to chase after them. But Saris assures him she's alright, because if he hadn't trained her earlier, she would have been expelled as a failure anyway. So, Saris happily tells him she is determined to follow him blindly, regardless of the outcome. Daria starts tearing up hearing her passionate words. Saris awkwardly says she is more concerned about Flem since he's here as well. She tries pushing him away because she's worried his status as a student is going to drop if someone sees him hanging out with such suspicious people. But the guy remains careless and starts approaching students to preach them about the new faction. Flem is glad they are so worried about him, but he assures them to stop thinking so much because, just like our protagonist, he doesn't care about the authority at all. Flem is sure there's no way he can avoid the punishment he's going to get for losing against Daria, but since he has already broken their expectations, he doesn't mind taking independent actions. Daria is glad, but he doubts just the three of them can achieve something so quickly. He gets an idea and excitedly asks Flem to just order his fangirls to join their group. Saris admits it's a great idea, but she reminds the protagonist that being caught up between the two major organizations can destroy people's lives, so they shouldn't act without thinking. The girl asks him to be more thoughtful about things. Daria understands and apologizes. A mysterious man suddenly appears and confirms if it's really Flem's group. The innocent protagonist guesses they are students who came here to join his faction, but the man calls them out for their harmful actions that are destroying the Academy's reputation. He reveals that they are here to take our boy and his group on the headmaster's orders, so without wasting a second, the men grab Daria and Saris and begin dragging them toward the headmaster. Our boy assures Saris not to worry while the other man grabbing Flem questions why he's involved in such a stupid activity. Daria feels irritated, but with an excited expression, he guesses it's a good opportunity for him to meet the face of the Academy's leader. Inside the headmaster's room, Daria and Flem remain calm, while Karis's face shows obvious signs of anxiousness. The headmaster thanks them for appearing and introduces himself as Rudolphin Garfwelm. The old man lets them know he's the headmaster of the Academy. Noticing the rings on his fingers, Daria assumes he's a magician as well, so he confidently asks the headmaster if he's mad about whatever Daria is up to. The other man gets angry and shouts at him to shut up and stop disrespecting the headmaster, but the old man remains calm and says he's aware of the foolish conflicts between swordsmanship and magic. However, he wants Daria to understand the situation, so he gives an example and shares that both swordsmen and magicians do not mix together. But he's glad both factions have somehow achieved peace right now. So, he wants them to keep things in harmony, but the protagonist's activities are destroying this peace in the Academy, and his actions might even affect the world itself. The headmaster calls him dangerous, but Daria doesn't agree with him and says that he believes magic and swordsmanship are just tools that can be used to fight against monsters and protect humanity. There is nothing important about them, so replacing such simple tools with bullshit authorities and organizations and then being scared of going against them is completely absurd. The teachers are unable to stay patient after hearing such rude words, but out of nowhere, a student, completely out of breath, barges inside. The teachers are surprised, so they order him to explain what he's trying to do. The first-year student, in a miserable state, explains that his classmates, who were in the swamp just in front of the academy, are getting attacked by huge monsters. His news shocks all of them. The poor student continues and explains he was somehow able to escape and return without dying, but his other classmates are still stuck and are running through the swamp, trying to save their lives. He begs the teachers to help his class, so the protagonist turns around and begins leaving. The headmaster's goons try stopping our boy and question why he's leaving. With a serious expression, Daria tells them it's obvious he's going to help the first years. His friends feel relieved to hear this, but the goon orders him to stop since a pathetic student like him is just going to get in the way of trained teachers who will go to their rescue. The protagonist stops holding back words and makes it clear that there's no one stronger than him in the whole academy. The teacher feels frustrated hearing such words, so he orders Daria to stay put and think about what he just said instead of boasting meaninglessly. Daria becomes fed up and lets them know that if they are still caring so much about authority instead of worrying about the students, then they are certainly not qualified to be called teachers. Everyone gets speechless, and suddenly Rima moves forward and assures everyone he understands the frustration they have with Daria's behavior. But he gives his word that our boy really is the strongest in the academy, stronger than all the teachers. The other teachers can't believe his words, but the headmaster confirms his words and asks if he's trying to say that the protagonist surpasses even him. Rima is hesitant, but he answers positively. So the headmaster does the right thing and gets up from his chair, shocking everyone in the room. He bows down and requests Daria to go there and save the first-year students. The other teachers find it hard to believe, but the headmaster accepts Daria's plans and mentions the monsters are suddenly gaining insane strength, so he needs Dorea's support to solve this. Our boy feels a bit confused since he was under the impression that the headmaster hated him or something. But the old man assures him he was just following the general perspective. But from his own point of view, he doesn't hate the protagonist at all. This puts a smile on Dorea and his friends. The headmaster takes responsibility and lets them know he's going to send a few skilled teachers as well, so our boy doesn't need to push himself too hard. Dorea understands everything and leaves confidently, while the other teachers remain speechless. One of them wonders why the headmaster acted this way, so the old man tells him it's time the foolish conflicts finally come to an end. Outside the academy, our boy reaches the swamp with his friends, and Flem recalls that the monster they are after is a giant-like creature. Seeing the huge footprints in the swamp, they are able to predict its direction. The protagonist believes it's great to find the footprints, but he suddenly pulls out his sword. Out of nowhere, a few monsters jump out of the water and try attacking Saris while she's looking somewhere else. Both Flem and Dorea intervene and protect the girl while advising her to remain cautious. Flem moves forward to protect them both, and as the monsters charge forward and attack him, he easily blocks their attacks with his sword and cuts them in half with just a few slashes. The guy remains determined not to waste a single second, since they need to find the students quickly. Saris is amazed by his skills, but the protagonist expects this much from the genius. Flem feels a bit teased hearing that nickname of his since his strength is not even comparable to our boy's. Another monster tries attacking, but Flem swiftly defeats it without breaking a sweat. He announces that he's going to do his best and save the academy's students as soon as possible. Hearing his words, the protagonist asks Saris why he looks so cool. He suddenly remembers they came here to save the students, so the whole group begins rushing towards the footprint trail. Seeing the suspicious place, our boy wonders why they were having a class here, because the monsters they just encountered are easy for them to handle, but no normal student can face such monsters. Flem explains there is a rare water called miracle water somewhere hidden in the swamp area, and if someone uses it to make weapons, they're able to get high-quality stuff. Every year, both the swordsmanship department and magic department have combined classes in which they compete to see who gets their hands on the miracle water first. Flem believes our boy did it as well, but the protagonist has no memories of what happened before, so he just brushes it off. Even though the teachers only allow the students to search near the entrance of such a horrible place, Flem explains that students end up losing their patience and going deep into the swamp out of greed. Dorea understands this, and guesses things didn't go as planned this time, because monsters are suddenly getting stronger for some reason. While they're rushing, an army of swamp monsters appears and starts chasing their group. Saris anxiously complains, since the army is too huge, but the protagonist rushes forward despite hearing warnings. He smiles and tells them to just wait a second, and with a few slashes, he defeats multiple monsters with ease. He uses his magic blast to destroy a few and continues fighting all of them alone. Our boy cuts through the whole army in a flashy way to finish the job. Somewhere else, the injured students run for their lives while questioning why they're being chased by such a huge monster. They end up reaching a dead end with nowhere else to run, but the huge monster catches up to them, so they all start trembling in fear, unable to do anything. The terrifying monster comes closer and tries attacking the female student with a weird hammer, but the protagonist makes it in time and, with his sword, blocks the hammer attack and saves everyone. The students are shocked, while our boy confronts the terrifying monster and becomes determined to end the chaos it's causing. Luckily, all the students and the teachers involved in this mission only sustain a few minor injuries, and no one loses their life. So, the protagonist smiles confidently as he just needs to finish off the source that's causing all of this. He decides to settle things, but the monster screams and begins attacking with the giant hammer. Everyone's jaw drops, seeing the protagonist standing his ground against the attacks without any effort. Another student mocks everyone, even in such a horrible situation, and calls swordsmanship superior because mages are completely useless in fights like this. But hearing his disrespectful words, our boy puts away his sword and warns the student to avoid spouting such nonsense. He ignores the monster and lets the students know both swordsmanship and magic are equally important, so it doesn't matter which one they choose. The monster almost lands an attack from behind, but Dorea confidently unleashes his magic power and makes it clear to everyone that any power can help them solve the problem easily. Everyone is shocked once again. He pushes back the monster and explains that if they are still in the process of learning, then they should all use both swordsmanship and magic to cooperate and solve the problem. He orders the cocky student to watch carefully as he is going to show how to fight with both skills. He believes the students should at least try to improve themselves and learn both skills before throwing such nonsense claims about authority. He ends his explanation and asks his senior to join him. Flem appears from behind the monster and lands an attack in a flashy manner. Seeing blood gushing out of its body, the monster gets riled up and begins throwing more attacks. Dorea points out that such attacks are difficult for even the genius senior of his, So he pulls out his magic to help the guy and restrains the huge monster with some kind of purple rope to show the students how to work together. With the monster restricted like this, Flem decides to go all out. So he attacks with unlimited slashes and defeats the monster. Daria helps everyone understand what just happened while the monster drops dead. Saris appears and informs them she finished treating everyone's injuries, so all the students and teachers are slowly escaping from the swamp. Our boy thanks her, and they all decide to leave. Saris sees the dead body and confirms if this is the giant monster they were after. Flem answers positively, so the girl recalls a legend she heard about the mist giant that lives in this swamp and carries 2 giant clubs. She doesn't understand where the name came from but explains it used to be the undefeated tyrant of this place. Our boy feels a bit suspicious since it went down a bit easily, but all of a sudden, the monster gets back up. Flem warns everyone to remain cautious and stand behind them. The monster pulls out 2 clubs this time, and a weird purple aura begins spreading everywhere, making the students terrified. It starts undergoing a transformation and releases mist fog from its mouth as its eyes turn red. Flem covers his face but realizes it's not poisonous, just some kind of fog. Saris and the others begin feeling anxious since nothing is visible.